The parallels between Moana and Pocahontas have already been extensively covered. I mean, Moana is basically a do-over for Disney when it comes to this story arc, and in my opinion, they do substantially better. I also don't want to step on Lindsay Ellis's toes too much, because I think she'll cover this way better than me. I just want to catch everyone else up to speed. But today, I want to look at the movies Jeffery Katzenberg produced after Pocahontas, because he wasn't a part of Disney in 2016 when they made Moana. But first, we have to go back to 1991. 1991 was highlighted by the start and end of the Gulf War, the end of the Cold War, and the Hubble telescope launched. Disney was halfway through the Renaissance era, which is widely regarded as one of the best eras in Disney history, and they released Beauty and the Beast on November 22nd, 1991. Beauty and the Beast was historic compared to all other Renaissance era films for one reason and one reason alone: the Academy Awards. See, back in 1991, they didn't have a category for Best Animated Picture, so Disney never really had a shot. But with Beauty and the Beast, they finally got nominated for Best Picture, being the first animated film nominated. They didn't win it, sadly, but this proved to Jeffery Katzenberg that winning Best Picture with an animated feature was possible. He just needed a foolproof plan. He released some movies that were seen as inferior to the movie planned to come out in 1995 in Aladdin and The Lion King. People working on The Lion King actually jumped ship to work on what they seen as the crown jewel, Pocahontas. Pocahontas was the movie that Disney believed would get them that Best Picture, but sadly, it did not. Pocahontas is ranked 10th out of 10 when it comes to Renaissance films with a whopping 55% on Rotten Tomatoes. And just to add a cherry on top, the movie that was seen as inferior, The Lion King, made $600 million more in the box office. Even though Jeffery Katzenberg was fired in 1994, he was still an executive producer on Pocahontas up until that point, greenlighting the idea and helping the creative process until he was replaced. The studio doesn't name him for the movie, but he was, without a doubt, a major part to why Pocahontas was released. So Pocahontas comes out to mixed reviews, with most of the major complaints coming from how Pocahontas was over-sexualized, as was John Smith. And if you do a bit of research, this is valid. Pocahontas in real life was about 9 or 10, and John Smith was 27. John Smith also wasn't this hunk man with an American accent, blonde hair, blue eyes, but more like this. And Pocahontas and John Smith were never married, nor ever involved with each other. But having a 9-year-old romantically involved with a 27-year-old is not a movie that should ever be made, let alone a Disney movie. In order to make this movie cater to the most audiences, they made this change. The original idea for the movie was to have the Powhatan people speaking Algonquian, as we get to see Pocahontas slowly learn English. Again, to save runtime and to make the movie more mainstream, they just made Pocahontas understand English because they
Listen with your heart, you will understand.
And some Algonquian phrases just trickled through the cracks. And don't even get me started on the music. In Moana, they actually took advantage of the Maori language and made a banger of a song out of it. In Pocahontas, they just slapped a westernized song onto it and made the lyrics more relatable to Native American people by having Pocahontas say,
Have you ever heard the wolf cry to the blue corn moon?
So Jeffery Katzenberg made this movie incredibly commercialized to try and sell as much as possible and push for that Best Picture award. 1995 comes around. Jeffery Katzenberg is already removed from the studio, and Pocahontas gets mediocre reviews. Disney claimed they wanted to honor Native American people with this movie, but instead solidified the systemic problems that are facing in America today. The parallels between Moana and Pocahontas are super easy to tell, but for the most part, Moana did a much better job correcting its mistakes and just removed problematic parts. More on that later. But Disney didn't have Jeffery Katzenberg around then still. If you watch my last video, you'll know that Jeffery Katzenberg went to make his own studio, DreamWorks. The studio was doing pretty okay with its releases, most being somewhat successes, but Jeffery Katzenberg was ready to bet the studio on one movie idea that was bound to hit. You guessed it, The Road to El Dorado. This movie and Pocahontas actually don't have a lot in common when you look at the surface. The main characters in The Road to El Dorado are Europeaners, not meant to be on the trip. going on an adventure where they meet indigenous people, they accept them because the Native Americans believe they are gods. The main characters, Tulio and Miguel, are actually in the City of Gold because they want to steal from the people and return to Europe. Then we see that the religious leader finds out that Miguel and Tulio are not gods. He pulls some magic out of his ass that brings a god to life as a giant rock statue, and Miguel and Tulio must defeat it to show their divinity. They do, but Zeko Khan survives and finds the bad Europeaners to come and murder the people and steal the gold. Miguel and Tulio hide the city and save the people's lives, leaving with no gold and ultimately becoming better people, putting others' interests before theirs. This doesn't sound like Pocahontas at all, and all the parts that sounded somewhat similar could be written off as a coincidence. But, of course, there's always more to the story. Remember when I said Moana removed problematic parts? If we compare the two, Pocahontas has Europeaners in the story because it's historical and that's how they met. Moana, on the other hand, avoids all mentions of white people harming the indigenous people because I think they realized the fault that they had in 1995. In Pocahontas, they instead of making the white men the antagonist for literally annexing the land and murdering millions, forcing the native people to move, make both sides bad?
They're different from us, which means they can't be trusted.
They paint both sides as
Savages.
and make it as if the Powhatan people were in the wrong for protecting their land, when the Europeaners came in and
We invaded their land and cut down their trees and dug up their earth.
in Moana, they do the correct thing and completely avoid this issue because they do not want to deal with the complex issue in a children's movie. This long-winded summary leads to my point that Jeffery Katzenberg never learned from his mistake on Pocahontas. Even though he was a year removed from when the movie actually came out, he was part of the project and must have seen the poor reviews and backlash. When watching The Road to El Dorado, I couldn't help but wonder if he completely missed the point. Let me explain why. In Pocahontas, Pocahontas is the main character, with John Smith, the good white, as the other main character. In The Road to El Dorado, both main characters are good white men in Tulio and Miguel, with Chell being the most prominent side character. The problem with Pocahontas wasn't going to be avoided by making the indigenous people not main characters. Pocahontas wasn't a problem as a character. Sure, she had problems surrounding her style, the things that she did, but that wouldn't be fixed by making her a side character. In The Road to El Dorado, Jeffery Katzenberg thought making Chell as a side character would make her not open to scrutiny. And talking about Chell, if anything, it goes backwards when it comes to empowering girls and women. Pocahontas, sexualized and aged up as she is an independent woman. Chell quite literally is just an object throughout the film. She's another over-sexualized indigenous person who Miguel and Tulio agree not to fight over because they only want to steal the gold. Then Tulio does nothing to impress Chell, and she's all over him, and he wins her as a prize. Miguel is furious, not only because Tulio went behind his back, but also because he believed Chell was his for the taking if that deal wasn't in place. So Jeffery Katzenberg learned nothing when it came to the lead women character in the story. But at least he can fix other places, right? Right? So, I actually thoroughly enjoyed The Road to El Dorado. Tulio and Miguel bounce off each other perfectly well, being a great comedic duo, and I was surprised how much I was enjoying the movie. But then, this happens.
Behold, as the prophecies foretold, the time of judgment is now.
It's like Jeffery Katzenberg is oblivious to the old problems. Okay, so 20 minutes in, and the people never seeing a Europeaner before speak fluent English. DreamWorks ignore what Disney messed up with Pocahontas, and actually did worse. Disney had phrases and stuff showing how Pocahontas and John Smith connected through their language barrier, teaching each other things. And Pocahontas at least tried to half explain that she was speaking with her heart or through the wind or whatever it is. In The Road to El Dorado, they just ignore everything about the indigenous people talking as well as their music. Sideways covered how Moana uses the Maori language in their music. Did a really good job with it. I'll link it in the description. I suggest you watch that. But if we look at Pocahontas, they just westernized the music. And you bet your ass The Road to El Dorado did. In the movie, they could have set this in the year 2000. And the premise wouldn't have changed much at all. If El Dorado was this closed-off society until then. They would have treated Tulio and Miguel the exact same because they believed that these white men were gods. Chell does not act like a Native American, but rather another European person who happened to be trapped in El Dorado with Tulio and Miguel. Her mannerisms and the way she talks are just modern American, not Olmec. Yes, they are Olmec because the heads carved in the caves are ancient Olmec. But then, in the same vein, the people believe that sacrifices need to be done to please the gods, and dumping gold into the toilet or whatever this is pleases them. The sacrifices are what really annoyed me. It's widely known that ancient Native Americans would sacrifice humans constantly for gods and were cannibals and killed the team that lost the ball game. But this isn't true. Human sacrifices were incredibly rare. The losing team being sacrificed is also incredibly rare. Just think about it logically, okay? If they played even once a week, like the NFL does, and the losing team was sacrificed, that's an extra 10 men killed a week, or however many's on the team. They don't have millions upon millions of people that would make this a sustainable civilization, especially when they don't have modern medicine. Also, cannibalism was a myth written by Europeaners to make the Native American people more like savages. The movie just makes it seem like this small little village of people sacrificed constantly, and every single mistake is punishable by death. Finally, let's close off with the thing that took a massive step back in my mind, the spiritual magic. In Moana and Pocahontas, they have a spirit grandma who is there to easily deliver information to the audience without the main character talking to their pet friend. In The Road to El Dorado, the only spiritual, in quotes, I use it lightly because this is different from the other two movies. The only spiritual person we see is their religious leader, who uses it in the last act of the film. He talks about how he has foreseen the gods coming and how he uses his magic to figure this out. This could easily be seen as a load of bullshit because we know that this isn't true, but he is adamant that he has magic powers. We get to the third act of the film. Zeko Khan has been kicked out of the village by the people, and he literally uses magic to bring a god to life in the form of a rock statue. See the problem with this? In the other two movies, the spirits are their grandmas who are just trying to encourage them, trying to talk to them like it's their conscience almost, and that the audience can see the progression of the story through the spirit grandmas talking to the main characters to make them seem like they're more in touch with their ancestors or whatever. In The Road to El Dorado, this is a major plot point, making this spiritualness, again quotations, literal, affecting the story and becoming the major conflict. The movie is set up to make Miguel and Tulio show that they actually aren't gods, but prove that their religious leader is full of shit, so that Miguel and Tulio can be forgiven by the people for lying, and then they will leave, saving the people. Instead, they prove their religious leader is right, that the gods do exist, try to make Miguel and Tulio seem like they are actual gods because they have slain the rock god, and they are celebrated because they are gods who protected the people. Jeffery Katzenberg didn't learn his lesson from Pocahontas. The problems people had with Pocahontas weren't changed for the better in The Road to El Dorado, and sometimes changed for the wrong reasons. Jeffery Katzenberg may have saved Disney, had a stretch of fantastic movies released during the Renaissance era of Disney, but when he went off on his own, he didn't grow and learn from his mistakes as a producer, but fell back into the same problems. The movies, released 5 years apart, should have had progression when it comes to treating Native American people right. Jeffery Katzenberg should have learned literally anything from Pocahontas, but he didn't. Disney, even though it was 21 years later, proved they learned from their mistake and made my favorite Disney animated movie out of it. Jeffery Katzenberg proved that he didn't see the mistakes he previously made and made yet again another forgetful movie. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked, please let me know. If you didn't like, also let me know. Any movie suggestions you want covered, I'd greatly appreciate them. Write them down in the comments. I have a lot of scripts that I'm in the process of writing right now, so be on the lookout for those videos, and I'll see you guys later.